The following is a Thorf TV production brought to you in cooperation with Jack Thorfinson. Part 3 of our series, Your System. Today we will look at the rifle. Well, here we are. We finally got to part 3 if you made it through the first two parts and have returned. This is part 3 of my system, the rifle. And in the past, although I've used a rifle in the past, it really wasn't that big a part of my system, and part of the reason for that was I was in an urban setting a lot of the time. Not so much. I did have a few times where I worked for individuals who had large estates, and in those instances, then the rifle was part of the system. But most of the time, I was driving, so that's why this was the least part of my system in the past. Now, myself personally, this has become an important part of my system. I'm no longer living in an urban setting. And in an urban setting, you've got a whole different deal on what you pick. So, because I picked this, it may not necessarily be the best for you if you live in an urban setting. Here you've got a firearm that has a lot of power behind it, and has the ability to penetrate a great deal. So in an urban setting, you have to be very careful upon the application you use this. And I think that's why a lot of people have embraced the AR-15 and the 223 platform, because you have a little more frangible type of situation there with that ammunition than you will with what I've chosen for mine. That being said, even with that, you still have to worry about the penetration capabilities and what's behind the target, so it becomes a sticky deal with an urban setting. That's my little disclaimer for you. Now let's get to my system, and the AR-15 being a very, very popular item to have in your system for this. Probably more people have AR-15s in their homes in this country now than have hunting rifles. I would not be surprised. Very, very popular, but not my choice. And I'm going to tell you why I ended up where I'm at. And there's a couple different reasons. First off, one of the reasons that the rifle has never been a big part of my system is when I was growing up, in the era I grew up, there was this real bent on making a left-hander right-handed, and they succeeded with me, except for they failed in school because I write with my left hand. But everything else on all the sports, yeah, they made you throw with your right hand and do everything with your right hand, and as a result, I shoot with my right hand. I am predominantly right-handed when it comes to shooting, because that's how I was taught to shoot to start with, but I'm left-eye dominant, as I should be since I'm left-handed. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be the eye of dominance. Not necessarily will your eye of dominance be the same as your hand of usage. If you're right-handed, you aren't necessarily have a right eye dominance. But in my case, yeah, I'm left-handed, have left eye dominance, but I've from day one was taught to shoot right-handed, and I shoot right-handed predominantly. So because of that, the rifle was never something that I really excelled at when it came to using it in a rapid manner. Let's put it that way. But back to, if you watched my episode on shotguns, I'll show you what I used to use back in the day, and you'll see that it mirrors what was being used on the shotguns, and for the same reason. A Winchester 94 in 30-30. A really good cartridge to a certain distance. But the application that I would be using this is not going to be probably beyond 50 feet. But if it were, a longer distance shot. Back in the day, it would be probably being used on a vehicle, and it would probably be within 100 yards or less. So 30-30, not a long range cartridge. So it really gets bashed nowadays. There seems to be this, especially on the internet, seems to be this mindset that if you can't shoot 800 yards or 500 yards with it, it's not worth anything in a rifle, which is really totally disturbing, because yeah, there's not too many applications where you're going to need to shoot 800 yards or 500 yards. Not saying it might not happen in the right setting, in the right place. Here, and I'll get to that later, here it's not even a possibility, and we'll talk about why later, but this really was a great thing to have, especially when you're working on someone's estate, because again, like that shotgun from the last episode, there isn't anybody that out there now. Nowadays, I don't know, people, young kids nowadays growing up, I don't know how many were exposed, but 20 years ago, there's anybody out there whose father or grandfather, one or the other, didn't hunt at some point with a 94 Winchester and have one in the house. And when the average person would look at this gun, they saw a hunting rifle, or they saw a lever action rifle from the Old West, and it's a whole different connotation than if you had an AR-15, especially 20, even 10 years ago, a whole different connotation. And yet, this is the tactical rifle. A lever action is the tactical rifle from its time period. You can reload these fairly rapidly. Just shoving the round through the loading gate, and you can do it at any time as long as the magazine isn't fully loaded. You can shove another one in there. It's actually, with a little bit of work, you can do a lot with this rifle. And here you've got a sling on it, because a sling to a rifle is like a holster to a handgun. If you don't have a sling, then you got no place to hang, no place to put your firearm. And unless you're riding horseback all day long and throwing in a scabbard, you should have a sling. So here's the sling. Old leather sling on this thing. And I used to carry it around in, I guess they call it safari style, because it really is less threatening to people, and I feel, for me, a lot quicker to bring it up on target. But that's what I used to use, and I still use it around here a lot, is a lever action rifle. A very handy rifle. And the Cartridge 30-30, although it's not a long-range cartridge, you can take it out to 100 yards and be very accurate, and at the same time, you've got a heavy enough bullet with enough power behind it that if you had to put one through a windshield, you don't have to worry about it just veering off the glass. It's going to have enough power after it goes through the windshield to get the job done, and it might even have enough power to decapacitate an engine with enough shots. Where a 223, I'm not so sure about that. My shotgun choice, this kind of mirrors not only that, this also mirrors the Shockwave as a choice, because the operating system is so similar. Here you can carry this with the magazine loaded, and upon the point where you need to use it, very rapidly you can load it and it's cocked, and all you have to do is pull the trigger. And after you've pulled the trigger, you can leave that empty cartridge sitting in there, and it's no different than it was before with that empty chamber. And again, when you want to use it again, you just need to rapidly load it, and you can again shoot. And what this does is it gives you the ability to carry this around very safely because it's not chambered. It's an empty gun. It's a full magazine and an empty gun, empty chamber. And the other thing that's just fantastic about this gun is there's no safety to manipulate. Your safety is that empty chamber and having to load it by using that lever, which you can do very, very rapidly, and you can reload. You take a shot. So let's say I did that and took a shot. I could take a cartridge and slip it right back in. And I'm the same position I was before, except for I have an empty shell in the chamber instead of an empty chamber. Quite similar to the Shockwave in that regard. Very safe firearm to have around. Gives you a little leeway and comfort when you're using it and carrying it around, because you're not going to be using it every day, as in firing it every day, but you're going to be using it every day and carrying it. Kind of makes it a little easier to do, and especially if you're in a situation where you're working and doing it, you know, at the end of the day, you don't have to unload it. You can just put it in the safe or however you secure it at the end of the day, and it's all ready to go again the next morning. Yeah. Very, very handy. And again, like I said, it doesn't make people quite as nervous. Maybe nowadays, some of that nervousness that they felt 20 years ago isn't there as much with an MP5 or an AR-15, but I say it is. I say there are a lot more people out there that are comfortable with seeing those firearms than there used to be. But it's also made this gun to most people even less of a threat, and they're even more comfortable with this than they used to be, because it is perceived as being kind of an antiquated relic. Yeah. Really not a bad choice if you think that the number of rounds you have is going to be sufficient. And of course, you can reload it as you're going very easily, and you can reload very rapidly. So you've got a very potent cartridge here at a short distance for any kind of threat. Something to consider, and everybody's got to decide how much they want to stick themselves out there. Granted, I would prefer to have something that had a 30-round magazine attached to it, but you know, look at the difference here between that and this as far as lugging it around. Yeah, a big, huge weight difference, and the size difference. Granted, this can do a lot more things comfortably than this can, but when you really get down to it on a one-shot basis, when that bullet comes out of that barrel, it's doing almost absolutely the identical thing between these two firearms. That's why even to this day, although I have these, these still get used a lot. And along with that, if you go back to the other parts of your system and you don't rely on any one part at a time. So I've got my Glock 19 with the 15-round magazine plus backup mags. Yeah, you know, maybe 6 rounds in the magazine and another 6 rounds on that cartridge loop on my belt. Give me 12 rounds capability here with the others isn't sticking my neck out all that far. Yeah, I don't have 30 rounds right here, but you know, maybe it's not totally necessary to do that. So A lot easier, a lot handier. Something to think about, and that's the reason. One of the reasons I chose this is just it's so much handier and easier. But yeah, people don't get nearly as upset, and this is also easier to walk through if you have to walk through somewhere where there's other people, and you just are carrying it this way. You can actually cruise through the room, and because I've done it without even anybody seeing the thing as you come through. So it really worked out well in its day, a different time than it is nowadays, and of course your threats have increased too, because the threats have become more potent than they were back in the day also. So a lot of things to consider when you're developing your system, and you just gotta, convenience is always going to be there. It's going to be up in the forefront, because, and if you say, well, it doesn't matter, I'm not worried about convenience, well, you are, because you should be if you're not, because it is. It's up there in the forefront. If it's not convenient, you're going to have that day, because we all have those days where you go, I don't even care anymore. Somebody just shoot me. I'm not going through carting that around all day long. And you can take it from somebody who has a very, very, very expensive bulletproof vest he bought that he wore very seldom. Yeah, very seldom, because it's just in the middle of the summer, you're sweating like a pig, and it's very uncomfortable. And yeah, it's easy to get up and go, yeah, I ain't wearing that today. So convenience is always there, irregardless. And by the way, to not wear, if any of you are professionals out there, to have that attitude and not wear that bulletproof vest is not fair to the person you're protecting, by the way. I'll throw that out. But yeah, you have those days, and maybe there's some of you out there know what I'm talking about. But I'll go to my deathbed saying this is even today, a very relevant and adequate firearm for a lot of things. Far more than people give it credit for, I say. Especially if you got the latest and greatest up-to-date sidearm to back it up. But all comes back to the threat level and the areas you're in and what's surrounding your area. A lot of things to consider there. And that falls two ways on what's surrounding the area. The opportunities of people to do you harm versus the opportunity for you to screw up and do other people harm. There's a lot of ways to look at it, and you got to look at it from every angle in making your decision. And I can guarantee you that, like all things in life, there's a good chance that when you make decisions, no matter how good the decision is, everything's going to go absolutely opposite to the way it would be favorable for the decision you made, and that's life. You can't possibly be prepared for everything, nor can you ever expect, well, that could never happen. And in order for that to happen, this has to happen, that has to happen, that has to happen. That could never happen. Well, it happens. So, but back to the convenience, if it's not convenient, I'd rather have this than nothing at all. If this is going to be convenient enough that I like it and use it, versus the other. Just kind of a nice rifle that anybody that's had any exposure to firearms really doesn't look at this without having anything but kind of a glow, a warm thought when they see it, for the reasons I talked about. And of course, as opposed to an AR-15, you don't have the interchangeable magazines. You can't reload as fast or carry as much ammo on the gun physically itself. there's your downside. But you also have to think about the time period where I was working and the restrictions at the time on magazines. When you're restricted to a 10-round magazine, at that point, the lever actions start not looking so bad. And that 92 Rossi, there's another good example. There you're getting the capacity in it, but you're taking a real hit on the penetration on that round versus a 30-30. But yet you're getting about as close as you're going to get to a 30-30 in ballistics out of a pistol cartridge. So, and along with that, you have the capability on that one to interchange with your Police Service 6. So it may seem an antiquated pair of firearms to today's standards, but even back in the early 90s, it was a formidable system to use. You're just a little lacking on your capabilities on speed and reloads and initial ammo supply in the firearms themselves. So let's fast forward to today, and before I start today, I'm going to give you everybody's system is going to be different because it's going to be dependent upon what you do and what you're exposed to. And I'll say right from the get-go, out of all the times you may have to use a firearm, I think an application using a rifle at a distance is pretty far-fetched, or the scenario of ever happening is going to be next to, ridiculously small. That being said, we can take a scenario like, especially if you're living in a home that is exposed all the way around on the outside, and for some reason you have somebody deciding he's going to take pot shots at your house to terrorize you. Pretty easy for them to shoot up your home and you not have any place to go but the home itself if you got a large exposed area surrounding the house. So in that instance, it would be nice that after they've put enough rounds through your house, enough's enough to be able to get something out and try and solve the issue. Again, it's, as far as using it in a home defense situation, a fantastic firearm if the barrel length and the stock length are such it doesn't start inhibiting what you can do in confined areas. And again, it depends upon your home, size of your home, how it's set up, and again, what's beyond your house. And you have to be worried about the incredible penetration that a rifle has. It's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because it gets the job done and will do it fast, but it's a bad thing because it might do a little more than just get the job done, and that's what you have to worry about. So you have to take all those things into consideration and what you're going to use this for. So let's look at the rifles, and of course if you follow my channel you know what it's going to be, and that is the AK-47. And here we have Vepper, mullet Vepper AK-47. I showed it the other day on a video, if you watched my video the other day, and I've got a Game Spotter light on here set up. This is really set up, and it's a little overkill, but you can carry this being prepared for every little event so far that when it happens you don't have the item you need. So I try to make everything kind of overflow and have multiple purposes. And here we got a lot of coyotes around, but we've never had any instance of the coyotes attacking any of the calves. And I think the reason that is, number one, is there's so much small game around here for them, they don't need to. abundance of small game for them to get, number one. Number two, all our cows are Highland cattle and they all have horns. So we haven't had any problem, but I can go out any night and sit out in the dry bean and I can hear them. I can hear them out there whooping it up. So there is a possibility in the spring that maybe the game has been depleted in the wintertime and they're looking for something else, and we might have some coyotes attacking the calves. I highly doubt that'll ever happen. So this is my answer to that, is this flashlight, that in theory the green is supposed to not spook them from, yeah, so you can make your shot. But I don't feel so compelled to get something else additional to add to my system. This does work for everything I want to use it for. So there you have it. And again, back to the system again, what we have here, and unfortunately I didn't get enough time really to fulfill my system. So I don't have the backups I need, because contrary to popular opinion, all AK parts aren't interchangeable. We do have Jack's Vepr here, though, that we can steal parts from. So we got another one, and yeah, each one's kind of set up a little bit different, but not really. I have certain limitations. Although I could have taken this and set this up more similar to this. I will admit, but I really like the wood on there. So we're a little different in our positioning of the vertical foregrip on this. It's a little more up close and personal, a little tighter back to your chest than it is on that other one. But the stocks of every one of these have the absolute identical length of pull. So, and they're set to what most people would consider too short. It's 12 1/4 inches. But for me, it just seems to work right. And the only time that it's maybe a little short is in the summertime when you're not wearing multiple layers of clothing. But quite frankly, like 8 months out of the year, yeah, you've got like an inch of clothing on you. So that 12 1/4 inches actually works out fairly nice. It actually works out fairly nice. So I've set them all up, a 12 1/4 inch length of pull. All of them are basically identical. They're identical in any thing that's been added to them, which is really nothing. They're all pretty much set up the same, or just a straight factory setup, with a few exceptions. There really have no meaningful difference between each other. That would be the flash hiders are a little different, and that is about it. They all have the same grips on them, the same rear grip, the same front vertical grip. So the only difference being in this one having we'll call it, for lack of any other better word, the coyote gun, having a single point sling on the rear. And that, of course, could be abandoned. But I want to try it out and see how I like it. So far, actually, it works out quite nice. I actually do like it. And for the application I'm using it, it's not that big a deal. This here is an NPAP. This is your Serbian MPAP. It says Stava. And a far lesser expensive rifle, but I've had really good luck with this rifle. I really like this a lot, and I use this most. And I think I use it most because it's the cheapest one, and I hate to wreck stuff that costs a lot of money, so this is the one that I use the most out of the bunch of them. Of course, I've had this thing with these two. It's taken a long time just to get these two set up the way I want to get them set up. So, and of course, one of the beauty about, they're different, but a lot of the parts are interchangeable, and the magazines, of course, work in all of them. So all the magazines, and I really lucked out in that last year, for some reason, right after the election, all the magazines were being given away. So I really, really loaded up on magazines. I got, yeah. And I'm very happy. This one here's a Tapco, not the greatest magazine in the world, but considering I got several boxes of them for $3 a piece, if they don't last as long, that's all right. So you can never, if you get nothing else out of all three of these episodes, you can never have enough magazines. Yeah. Magazines are disposable items. Someday, God forbid, you may have to keep them running, and you want to have parts for them so you can keep them running as long as you can, and new springs and followers and things like that so you can keep them running. But basically, yeah, they're disposable. If you can still buy a new one and throw the other one away if it's bad. So, because a lot of malfunctions are coming from the magazine, not the firearm. Each one of these guns has a Picatinny rail set up for a flashlight. And again, here's a little difference. These two have Jack's gun, and the NPAP have them set same spot right here, and then we're underneath on the first Vepr there, because that forend is so long, it worked out nice, and I wanted to put that flashlight on the front. The game, this, by the way, is a Streamlight TLR1 Game Spotter flashlight, and I've really had good success with the Streamlights. And on the other ones, I just ordered a new TLR1 weapon light for these guys, and just one light, and I just put it on whichever one I'm going to use. And I was kind of trying to decide which one I wanted, and I finally decided upon the TLR1, and I can use it on the Shockwave or these. So I'm just going to carry it with me all the time and put it on whichever one I'm using that day. If I got the Shockwave, I'll put it on that. If I got one of these, I'll put it on this. If I have this, I'll put it in my pocket. Just the way it's going to be. I think, and you're wondering why I'm doing that, and I'll tell you why. Number one, I don't want to have a different flashlight on everything I use. I want to have it operate the same fashion. So I'm used to how it works. Now I got a downside on this one. That being, it's in a different position than the other. But I'm perfectly happy with that, because I wouldn't want this thing hanging on the side being as large as it is. As large as it is, it's not so obnoxious and intrusive when it's hanging here as it would be hanging up here on the side. But it is a TLR1, and it operates in the identical manner that the other one will, so I'm still functioning the flashlight the same. The other reason I want to do that is, which is the downside to having this one on this one, I want to make sure the flashlight's working all the time, and the flashlight's going to be working all the time because I'm using the same flashlight. It's on my pocket, it's on the Shockwave, it's on here. When it's not working, I'm fixing it. It's not sitting in a cabinet, and I've stupidly bumped it when I put the gun away, and the flashlight's been on for the last 4 years, and I opened the cabinet to use that gun, and the flashlight's dead. No, it's always going to be working, because as soon as it's not working, I'm going to know it, because I use it every day, and I'm going to change the flashlight. That's the other positive to using the same flashlight on every firearm. And I've positioned the Shockwave on the same side as the Picatinny rails are going to be set up on these, so it's really quite similar on operating it. Even though guns are different, the flashlight's in the same spot, you see, and it operates the same way. There we are with our system on the rifle, and again, in my setting, this could be used for home defense and everything in between, because with this cartridge, the 7.62 by 39, I don't have the distance. If I take a shot that's correctly made, and even for some reason it doesn't hit the target, this bullet's going to drop to the ground before it's ever going to reach anything that I'd be worried about destroying. Put it that way. So the negative everybody says about this is it's not a long distance rifle. To me, that's a positive. If it'll work a distance that's long enough that I need it to work, I don't need it to work beyond that, nor do I want it to work beyond that. I just assume it starts losing its capabilities at that point and starts dropping like a lead weight. Says I. So there's the choices we got that we've picked. The Winchester 94, which you can't argue with that, a great old gun, and one that most people look at and have a warm spot in their heart for. And this one, not so much. I get that. It's an AK. Yeah. But awful practical firearm, easy to maintain and clean, and very, very rugged. So that's my pick, because I'm not a real rifle guy, and the amount of use I have for a rifle is really, really, really small. And yet I need to have something. I need to train on it and be good with it, because that one little small usage I have for it, if it comes up, I want to have this thing and know that I can fulfill what I'm supposed to do with it. So when I make that shot, I know what I'm capable of doing, and I can make that shot when I pull the trigger. Well, there you go, guys. There's the rounding out of the system. The least important to me, but one of the most effective firearms in your system. But to me, and not necessarily the least important, I'll take that back. I am just so ingrained with doing everything with a handgun, because that was the real emphasis of, and that is what 99.99% of the time for what I was doing, that was the best tool for the job. And quite frankly, if you're going to use a rifle, even if it's an SBR or that Shockwave, the handgun way outperforms it when you're inside a car. When you're in that small confined area, really the handgun becomes the tool of choice and the most effective thing to have on you. Says I. So there you have it. And before I leave you and wrap this up, I'm going to briefly go back through my other two systems and highlight the important thing on them, be it the shotgun or the handgun or the rifle. The important thing is to have one that you shoot really well, train on it, and get good training, the best training you can afford to get. And since you've gone to the effort of getting the best training and trained on it, you should back that firearm up so if you have a breakage on it, you're not out of business. You can use the other firearm while that gets fixed. Along with that, why not back that firearm up too? Then it's going to last you a lifetime, and the worst case scenario is you have to take parts off of one to keep the other two running. You have to take parts off the second one to keep one running. And with 3 guns, if you're middle-aged or even close to it, I think you'd be able to keep them running the rest of your life. Especially if you bought some parts. Do a little research, find out what parts in your firearm tend to break first, and buy those parts up front and squirrel them away. Get a good supply of parts. 3 firearms, a good supply of parts, and I'll bet they'll last you your lifetime. You only have to train on them once, get instruction on them once, get good with them once, and then maintain that. Maintain that ability. continue to train and maintain that ability, but you only have to learn how to do it once, and you don't have to go and find another gun you shoot well and start all over again. Although you may think it's entertaining, and it may be to a certain point, it doesn't make financial sense, nor does it really enhance your ability to use the firearm when you have to use it to save your life. When it's the real deal and your heart rate's going 1,000,000 miles a minute and you've dumped one in your shorts because you just switched to a CZ because that's what everybody's doing this week. Yeah, I'm an antiquated guy. I got antiquated firearms, but I've trained on them. I've spent a lot of money training on them. And I keep using them, and I can use them well, instinctively well, because it's the training's there and you instinctively revert to your training. And I'll leave you one thing that's kind of sort of like part of your system or not, but it's kind of applicable. Human beings are the only animal on this whole planet. You took all the animals on the planet. Human beings are the only ones that do not, I repeat, do not follow their instincts. They'll do the stupidest things for the stupidest reasons, even though there's a voice inside of them that's their instinct telling you, what the hell are you doing? Don't do that. And here, right here, this is not something that you follow. Oh, you know what I want to do today? And the voice says, no, you've just gone to gun sight. You've just spent $3,500 training on that. You just bought 30 magazines for it. You've got everything set. Your leather came in for it. Your Kydex holster came in for it. You've got your whole system set up for that. And you go, yeah, but I gotta get that gun and use that gun. Yeah. Just stupid. Don't be stupid. Pick something that you shoot well, train on it, back it up. It'll last your lifetime. When it comes that you have to use it, you're going to be so familiar with the gun. You are going to, even though you're a human being and you never follow your instincts, when you crap in your pants and your heart rate's going, you're going to just instinctively go back to your training, and you'll be so well trained on this and so well versed in this firearm that you're going to do what you need to do, and you're going to do it right the first time. Don't be that person fumbling around with something they've never gotten training on. They've never spent more than 5 hours, 10 hours shooting. They've only put 300 rounds through that gun in their whole life, and that's the gun they're going to pull out when that happens. Because it's just, not only is it foolishness and stupid, but it's not fair to you, because it's not going to be allowing you to do the kind of job you can do and should do when you need to do it. This is not some fun time driving your new Corvette down to the drive-in for everybody to see it, or your old collector car, driving it down to the drive-in. Yeah, I've got 12 collector cars tonight. I'm taking the 66 Mustang down to the drive-in and hang around. No, if you want to collect guns, collect guns. Put them in your safe, take them to the range, enjoy them, collect them. They're a good investment. Knock yourself out. But when it comes to putting one in a holster and carrying on you, carry one you've trained with and are good with. Don't be that idiot that carries a different gun every day. Be that guy that carries the same gun and is good with it. You've got a responsibility to other people. You got a responsibility to your family to come back alive. You got a responsibility to yourself not to do something stupid. And carrying a gun you bought 3 weeks ago that you've put 50 rounds through it, when you've got one at home you've trained on and are good with, is stupid. It's beyond stupid. And there you go, guys. There's the end of my series. The 3-part series on your system. And do what you want. This is what are the key parts of my system. And what I train on and what I continue to train on. And there are other things out there I use, but I don't use anything that I'm not trained on and that I'm not good with. Those are collector guns, or they're range guns. But they aren't guns I put in a holster and carry, because it doesn't make sense, because I've got ones that I've trained on, and I know I'm good enough to use it when it hits the fan. There you go, guys. Thanks for tuning in. If you watched all 3 of my segments, thank you very much. Till next time, from Mr. Holster and Jack, go out and stay safe.